Good evening and welcome to another in the series Why I Write. My name is Tontlin Oliver, and it is my utmost pleasure to be here with you once more for another in the series Why I Write. If you've been following us for a while, you know that we really enjoy the whole business of bringing our creative minds to this platform so that we can hear from our writers or creative persons about why it is they write, why they paint, why they make music, even why they teach, why they feel that it is important for us to hear from them in the printed form or in a film form, whatever it takes. We are so glad, we're so grateful for the ability to definitely reach out and make these connections. So you can definitely learn more from what we are chatting about. I'm just making a note here while we are starting, simply because we had some technical issues that we had to get fixed. And we're good to go. Tonight, we have a very special guest, another very special guest in the person of Pamela Mordecai. Some people say Mordecai, some people say Mordecai. She's going to clarify the pronunciation once we start talking. And I tell you what, this lady is a lady I used to watch as a young lady. I was probably in high school, I was in my teens, and I used to watch her on television when she was a television host. And again, you know, I end up in the business. So she's one of those persons I modeled because we had such great examples back in the day. So she's one such person, author, teacher, children's writer, poet, you name it, a laundry list of talent that we have from out of Jamaica. So help me welcome to our platform of Why I Write, Pamela Mordecai. I said it the other way this time. Welcome, Pam.
Thank you, Tontlin. Thanks. Great to be here. Looking forward to talking to you or with you.
Yes. Yeah, man. We are going to laugh and chat and draw a long bench, as they say.
Yes, we were going to draw a long bench. Draw a long bench.
And you know what? They say good company keeps long hours. That's what they said to us, right?
Amen.
But we're not going to keep you here long tonight. We do apologize for the wait with our tech issues in this day and age when we are working with all kinds of wonderful scientific discoveries. It still doesn't prevent that which you don't wish to go wrong. But here we are today. So let's start out where I started. Pam, how do you say your last name? Mordecai. I remember Mordecai in my ears from watching you on television back in the day.
Well, it was explained to me this way. And you remember, I remember ads on the radio about 𝐿 Mordecai. And you have to remember, Totlin, that is not my born name. That is a name I acquired when I took on to myself Mr. Mordecai's son. Right? In fact, his youngest son, because he had he had two families, right? He had a family of 6. So Martin is the youngest of that family, right? Then he had, his wife died. Martin's mom died with the baby that came after him. Both the baby and herself died. And his dad married again. So it's like interesting. It's 4 girls followed by 4 boys. Right? Anyway, I remember these ads, and Grandpa and that family call themselves Mordecai. And it was explained to me that the Mordecais were the poor people and the Mordecais were the wealthy people. Well, 𝐿 Mordecai and the company, you are too young to remember that, but I remember that as a little girl on the radio, and and 𝐿 Mordecai. So we called ourselves Mordecai, but most people say Mordecai. I mean, in part from the book of Esther in the Old Testament. That's how people say it, right? So, you know, what difference does it make? Mordecai,
You know what?
Tomato.
What I'm loving is the fact that in this just very brief explanation, again, you're highlighting the fact that for those of us from Jamaica, we definitely come from a community out of many one people, So you hear all the heritages of the world in our names, in our country. And again, when you just reminded us about Mordecai being the uncle of Esther in the Bible, I remember that. Oh yes, I remember when I was reading that story. I said, "Oh yeah, that name." I'm so familiar with that name because we're from Jamaica. There are other people in other parts of the even first world who has never heard of Mordecai.
That is true. That's true.
You know, but we have heard about it. Welcome. So good to see you. So good to see
you too.
So good for this connection. And, you know, you brought up the whole business of your husband, Martin. And we were actually talking earlier before we came on air about how you two met when my internet just decided to misbehave. So let's start with a romantic story as we as we lead into our chat this evening. How did you two meet?
Well, we met at JIS, right? Because he started life as a journalist. His first job was at the Gleaner, right? And then he moved from there to JIS Radio. And then, of course, you remember TV, 1962. Of course, you were about 2 if you were born at all, right?
You were born.
And he moved from radio into television, which was, as you know, an absolutely, absolutely new thing, 1962, independence and TV, roughly about the same time.
Right.
And the JIS, as you know, because you were at JBC at a certain point, I know, and I think you did work with JIS too, yes?
I did work with JIS and JBC and RJR, yes.
Right. And so they had, of course, to train Jamaican people to handle this new technology. And Martin was one of those persons. I think Kerry Robinson, you know, Kerry was like the big boss. But he had this crew of people like Easton Lee, Mitzi Townsend, and Martin was a youth among those, a younger, you know, person. But JIS, being government funded, was not more than half an hour every evening, half an hour. And so they used a lot of part-time people. And I was one of the part-time presenters, which is how I met. Martin was basically my boss to begin with, because I was presenting programs that he was producing, right?
Right.
And after that, you know, it happened fairly quickly. I met him in 65, and by 66, we were married. So, yeah.
Your eyes met across the room, across the camera lens already.
But they must have met, because we went on and there were other meetings, put it that way.
Put it that way, yes. And he is now of blessed memory. He was also one of the co-authors of one of the books you both produced, and he was a writer as well. As you mentioned, he started out life as a journalist.
Right, he did. And I mean, it's amazing. Like Olive Sr., he and Olive worked at the Gleaner together, right? And I talk to people, and there are so many people whose beginnings were at the Daily Gleaner. You know, that is where they kind of cut their teeth on the whole business of handling the written word. So, and of course, Barbara Gludon was at Gleaner. Barbara Gludon, I think, was in charge of that whole young set of them, right. Martin, Olive, and so on, Alvona Lean, and so on. So, yeah. That is
those were the days. Those were the days.
Indeed.
Those were the days. I think it's a wonderful heritage that we have in the business of broadcasting. It's fantastic. You all laid away the foundation, you know, the likes of Leonie Forbes, Charles Hyatt, so many folks. In fact, with this past weekend being the running of the Kentucky Derby, I was called into remembrance that every Saturday I would be on radio. And I had to do the duty announcements in between the Caymanas racing commentary that went on every single solitary Saturday. Don't ask me anything about racing. I still don't know. but it was great to hear, great to be there. Pam, you have been, just by this little snippet of history that we started off our conversation with, you have traveled so many different roads in your life. And you are now a celebrated author, because I didn't even realize you were an author until maybe a few years ago, but you were writing from so long before. In fact, you wrote your first poem when you were in school, little school, right?
Yes, yes.
Tell us about the entree into the writing area when you were just so young.
I will tell you, because Totlin, it speaks to exactly what we're talking about, why we write. And this is going to age me up in a care. In 1951, Hurricane Charlie hit Jamaica. And it was devastating, really, right? I remember my daddy sneaking out between, you know, the eye of the storm and the lull, everything is quiet. And my father could do everything with his hands, everything, build a house from the foundation up. So in the course of the lull, he went outside with his hammer and his whatever, because galvanized, flying off the roof and all them things. I remember him going outside to, you know, sort of do what he could do to prepare for the next half of the storm that was coming up. So age 9, this was really a devastating experience. And I wrote to express that, to talk about that experience. You know, writing can help you to do all kinds of things. It can help you to express great joy and excitement, great sadness, and also great terror, because a 9-year-old dealing with this awful, horrible. My little brother, I remember him being in his crib, and I think Daddy had to move the crib out of the bedroom into the front of the house because water was just filling up everywhere. I remember, I can see it now in my mind, you know. So being really shook up by this experience, that's one of the reasons why you write, you know. It's to tell a story. I was listening to you speaking to Neville Ying, and he was talking about telling stories in his book. And I guess what the poem did was tell the story of my experience of this frightening thing, you know. It starts out terror and horror, that it was. For sadness and sorrow, it did and it does, and so on. Okay, so I was frightened. I dealt with it by writing.
So did you write the poem after the cleanup of the storm, during the storm, or in between? My goodness, zinc flying all over. When did you?
No, I wasn't doing nothing but shaking in my shoes while the zinc was flying off the roof. No, I think it must have been a bit afterwards. Yeah, a bit afterwards.
And where were you living at this time when Hurricane Charlie hit?
I was living in a place that was at the time called Vineyard Pen, because, you know, Totlin, you know what I didn't realize? All those places called pen, and there were several of them, were in fact pens for animals. Originally, they were actually pens, right? I think I am right. I'm subject to correction always. But of course, it eventually turned into Vineyard Town. But that was where we lived.
So May pen was one big pen for whole for cow, horse, donkey.
No. We should find out, Totlin. We should both find out. We should find out, you know?
I think learning about our heritage, most specifically, is so key in going forward today. I have a question already here in the chat from one of our former Why I Write guests, Delvon Bulby Campbell, and he was asking, are you related to Jeffrey Mordecai? I hope the spelling is right. Yes. If go ahead.
No, I was saying that I was watching you talking to Bulby as well. And yes, of course. Yes, Jeffrey is Martin's brother. He's his little brother.
Wow, look at that. I believe that Jeffrey even lectured me on campus in law, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on campus and he did lecture. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, he was one of my lecturers. Yes, indeed. Wow, small world. So here you are in Vineyard Pen, and where you are located, you have this awesome view of the mountains. That would be Waurika Hills And
absolutely, absolutely.
it's gorgeous. It's a view that nobody talks much about, the Mountain View area right there. It is, but it's so secluded. It's so, unless you have business in Vineyard Town, you don't go in there.
Well, I'll tell you, you have to remember that I'm a fossil. I'm about to be put into a museum, right? I'm that old. I remember, you know, this man, this poet, Jamaican poet, early, George Campbell, has this poem called Women Stone Breakers. I remember it. The first lines are women stone breakers, hammers and rocks, tired child makers, haphazard frocks. We used to go to the bottom of the hill and see women actually sitting on top of piles of stones with their hammers, doing exactly the breaking stone. And it's amazing because, I mean, now, I guess if you talk to a child about that, they would say, hello? Oh, what are you saying? What are you talking about? But I remember roads in Jamaica being marl roads, and the marl road was made out of brock stone, and that is how the stone.
Brought them one by one, Gallant boy brought them two by
two. Gallant boy, finger match, no crying, Gallant boy.
Yes, remember I play.
But I can remember that. I mean, that is one of the things that, and being Warwick Hill is an amazing thing, because you think of hills sort of gradually rising. Warwick Hill don't rise up. The flat go right up and then boom, a hill, right? The hillside just go up. So, mountains, that mountain, Long Mountain, Warwick Hill, is very much part of the experience of my childhood, of the world, the physical world in which I grew up. That mountain is right there. That hillside is right there.
You know, very foreboding, is like you can literally reach out and touch the top of it just by standing right there. And then, of course, it leads you out into St. Thomas there. And if we do that right turn, pass by Harborview, we're onto the Palisades Strip. And I know the Palisades Strip must have looked so different during your time as compared to now, because hurricanes have changed the way the Palisades Strip looks today.
I tell you one thing that I miss, and that I wonder how many young people in Jamaica now have experienced, because of course of pollution. We used to love to see phosphorescence in the water. Because if you go down there at about 6, when it's getting dark, and you look in the water, there's phosphorescence. You see that wonderful shining. I mean, I think it exists no more totally. I don't think so.
I've never heard of that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is absolute. Was it the kind of water you could have lit? Would it have lit up if you tried to light it? There are some areas of water in Jamaica where if you go and you light a match, it has flames of water.
No, I think this is some kind of sea creature that, but it would need to live in clean water, and we don't have the polluted water will not support that life, I think. Again, subject to correction, because you know, I'm not a scientist. If I'm not.
So I've never heard of phosphorus in the water. That would give. I've never heard of that. The only thing,
phosphorescence, I think it's called phosphorescence.
Oh, phosphorescence. Okay,
yeah.
You learn something new every day. My goodness gracious, you learn something new every day. Now, Pam, you have published over 30 books, including 9 collections of poetry, 5 children's books, and a collection of short fiction, Pink Icing. And this was published in 2006. And in 2019, you put your voice to this book.
I did.
In the You Speak audio editions, and that's so fabulous. So although you're busy referring to yourself as a fossil, you are right in step with the times. And your debut novel, Red Jacket, that we featured on our promo, that was shortlisted for the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Award. And that's one of Canada's top prizes for literary fiction. Your most recent book, The Book of Joseph, is a performance poem, and it was one of the 3 books of poetry that's long listed for the 2023 OCM Bocas Prize.
Here we are. Here we are.
Literature. I am loving all of these accolades. When you started out writing as a 9-year-old, did you see any of this in your future?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I tell you something, Tatlin. I listened to Neville, and that's a wonderful interview. Anybody who is listening to us and who hasn't seen it really should look at it, because for one thing, Neville is just a wonderful person. But the stories he was telling about growing up, where he grew up, right? I mean, yeah. Tatlin, I forget the question.
You know, you were talking about, you know, you didn't see all of this wonderful accolades.
I didn't. Because what I was going to tell you is something that I say and say again and say again. I went to a downtown school, right? I mean, I had nothing against the uptown school, them, you know, and St. Andrew was a wonderful school, Immaculate was a wonderful school, St. Hugh's was a wonderful school, and so on and so on. But I went to Alpha Academy, and Alpha was around the corner from KC and St. George's College. And at a certain point, Excelsior High School. Now you have to be really, really old like me in order to know that Excelsior High School was on North Street, right? But those downtown schools, somebody should write about them. Somebody should research and write about those high schools, because they, the community of students, right, was looked like Jamaica, much more so than they, I mean, I listened to people who went to, in one of the uptown high schools, girls' high schools in particular, talking about all their white teachers. Well, I never had all their white teachers. The teachers who taught me, right? Not saying they weren't white ones, but even the white ones were not British. They were not English people. Mark you, one of the reasons why I write is on account of a wonderful, wonderful English woman named Mrs. Mary Caro, who had a wonderful, wonderful husband named Mr. Norman Caro, and in the teaching country. And Mary Caro was teaching us at Alpha, right? So I'm not prejudiced, and not that me I say. I'm just saying that I am really glad to have been a member of a school where our headmistress, Sister Mary Bernadette, was a Black woman, a beautiful, beautiful, tall, elegant woman, and she would process. There is no other word for it. She would process, right? In her white habit, with her white headdress. This is my headmistress, okay? My headmistress. And apparent at the moment, at that time, I don't think we appreciated, we're just for students. We're not, we don't know, we haven't, you know, we're not thinking about the society. Nobody was encouraging us to do that. I hope they do that now in school. But I just know that it made all the difference in the world to have a headmistress who looked like us, You know?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That is a school my mother happened to have attended, Alpha Academy.
Big up.
Yes.
Big up.
And by the time I got to Immaculate, yes, it was more of a greater mixture. Yes, indeed. Yes, 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 indeed.
I keep forgetting you're a youth. You're a youth, Tatlin. You're a youth. You're a young person.
Yeah, I'm coming up seriously right behind you, you know. So with as you progressed in life and you were encouraged by the teachers at your school. So from 9 years old, what school were you at when you were 9?
I was at Alpha. I cut my teeth. I went to Alpha and went on, and I tell people, and our state is the nuns them response. You speak to them. It's them responsible. I went to them at age 4 and I emerged out of their hands. Well, I went to school in the States on a scholarship into a college that was again run by nuns, but I was at Alpha until I left school in 1959. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, wow.
From 4 to 59.
All right. So when you left school, what was in your mind to do? Yes, you went away on a scholarship, but what was in your mind to do? Lawyer, doctor, Indian chief, what?
I was going to be a teacher. My mother had been a teacher, so I was going to be a teacher. And my sister and I both began our, professions, careers, whatever you want to call it. We both started out, my big sister Betty. By the time my little sister Mary came along, the options were doctor, lawyer, and Indian chief, right? And so she started actually, she never finished up as a lawyer, but that is what she elected to do. But I was going to be a teacher, like my mommy. Mommy was a teacher at Alpha. I was going to be a teacher. And that is what my training basically is for, is to teach.
And you did this teaching at this teacher learning at the Michael University, the Michael College, at the Michael, as it was called back then.
No. I went to, I started to teach, and let me boast about the people whom I taught. I taught the distinguished Donald Quarry. Some people who are youth might not know who the distinguished Donald Quarry is, but Donald Quarry is our champion Olympian sprinter. And I taught him. I taught Patsy Ricketts, who was an amazing dancer with National Dance Theatre Company, and another dancer who I think he went abroad, but he too, Williams was his surname. First name started with D, but I don't remember the whole first name. So I again, Camperdown was fortuitously a great place for me to start teaching. And I left there and went to UWI and did DIPED, Diploma in Education there. I did teach at Michael, and that is where I met the distinguished and wonderful Neville Ying.
Professor Neville Ying, man, indeed. Awesome. So when you experience all of these changes and sojourns in getting into your adult living now, you also were busy doing broadcasting. As you mentioned earlier, you started out being a freelancer with JIS. So I saw you on television more often than not. And you tended to do several other things all at once. When did your first published work appear on the scene? What was that like for you?
Well, I'm going to big up Alpha again and say, the thing is that, all right, here is something about Alpha that I don't think a lot of people know. You can look this up in Professor Errol Hill's book on theater in Jamaica. The Alpha Cottage was one of the first places in Jamaica where our own plays were written, where Jamaican people wrote Jamaican plays for Jamaican young people to put on, right? So there was a wonderful tradition of, I won't say literary performance at Alpha. And the nuns were very progressive. We had a school magazine and we had a school paper. And I can remember a poem that I published in the school paper, and I'm quite proud of it. It was, the thing is that by the time Alpha girls graduated, we had had an experience, if we wanted, of having written and seen what we wrote printed on paper, right? We didn't wait to join the Gleaner or join Public Opinion and so on. We had already had the experience of having written something and seen it, in print. Yes. So that was the first place that I saw something that I wrote in print. I was at high school still, in the school paper, and you felt really good. And it was a good-looking school paper too, if I say so. I wasn't putting it together, but it did look good,
Right.
Yeah, and it was printed at a printery. It wasn't cyclostyled. It was respectable production. So that is really where I saw the first things that I wrote. And then I went to college, as I said. I went to college in the US on a scholarship. My father and mother would not have been able to afford it. And I would have gone to UWI, except guess what, Tatlin? I was halfway into the first semester, the first term, and I get a letter from UWI saying, you have got a bursary, halfway through. So, otherwise I would have had a choice. I would have been able to say, well, I can go to UWI or I can go to foreign, right? But unfortunately, I didn't have that undergraduate UWI experience. I was in foreign, came back from foreign, and I started writing poetry. That's the first thing I wrote. And it was published in the first poem, I think, in a journal published in Barbados called BIM, right? Because I know BIM, short for Barbados, BIM. And that is where I started to publish poems, along with a lot of other people. I mean, people like, I'm going to guess, people like Dennis Scott and Mervyn Morris and so on. I don't know this for absolutely certain, but I do know that a lot of Jamaicans first published poetry in BIM.
Yes, Mervyn Morris did make mention of that publication when we did have our chat together. So yes, that is the origins of where we come from when it comes on to writers. And I've never published in BIM, but the fact of the matter is that this is something that you have seen happen and it has kept you going on your toes. Now, we have a few comments from our audience members. So I just want us to get together with our audience members and just say some hellos. Lamondre says, hi, hello, good evening. So does hi. Yvonne Murray, Joan Davis Williams says, this is interesting. Delvin also an alpha, right? He puts Viva Alpha. Donna Bembo is watching with us. Hi, Donna. She said hello. Yes, so those are some of the shout outs we just want to give as we go through going through what it is that makes you into a writer. So here it is, Pam, you've been writing since 9, you wrote throughout high school, you've gone away to college, you've come back, and you're busy teaching and you're getting involved in all of the various areas of arts. It never was then, what I'm hearing, a case where you decided one day, you know what, I'm going to be a writer. It seems as if the writer has always been in you, pulling you forward. Is this so?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I've never thought of it like that, Totlin, but I think really that is exactly what it is, or what it was. Because, I mean, I know, I suspect, and I'll ask Olive this, but I think that Olive, I'm guessing, in part from what I've read of her work, that she knew from very early on that writing was what she wanted to do. And I think Martin, at a certain point, he had very good teachers at school who encouraged him to do a lot of writing, right? So I think some people know from quite early on that writing is something that they want to do, right? But it's a kind of different process. Writing fulfilled me, but I never ever thought of myself as somebody earning a living from writing, right? As you say, it was like it was tugging me, something there, tugging me along. Even when I didn't know that was what was happening, that's how it went. And then finally, you know, I sort of, I guess, recognized.
Yielded to the call. You've also written textbooks. So this is the good feature about having the background of learning how to be a teacher, because it informs you, particularly because writing textbooks are not as easy or simple as it sounds. There are certain techniques you have to engage to help the learner along so that they can learn the material that you're offering. So you're being involved in education, no doubt, and you studied for education when you went abroad as well?
No. I did a degree in English and came back and went to UWE, right?
To do the DPED.
Yes, to do the DPED. And I have to say, with respect to the textbooks, right? Okay, before I say that, Totlin, I think that I'm a big fan, maybe not the best way of putting it, but I believe in cooperation, people working together. I would tell people, you want to get something done and you're kind of scared, you're not sure that you're going to be able to do it with somebody else to start with. You want somebody else, two head better than one, even if one is a goat head. You know that saying? You know that saying? They used to say, when we look a bit, two head better than one, even if one is a goat head.
Goat head.
But I did not work with a goat head. I worked with an amazing woman, younger than I, well, I don't know what to say, whether am or was, because She was 6 years younger than me and died, predeceased me. I think she has been dead about 10 years. But we had an amazing working partnership that lasted 25 years long. And that is where she and I together wrote most of the textbooks that I, not all of them, but most of them. And it was an amazing, we ended up being very, very good friends. But two important teachers we had at UWI, Cecil Gray, who is somebody, his name will be on textbooks. You will,
Yes.
You might have used a Cecil Gray textbook.
Oh, yes.
And Dennis Gray. Dennis was a linguist. Cecil was in the classroom, how to teach man. And they had both trained us. So working together, we had been taught by the same people how to teach. We had been taught how to teach by the same people. So in addition to which, I don't think that she and I liked each other when we first met, which is why you're not to take on your earliest feelings too serious. You have to just say, give a person a break, because I don't really think she did like me. I mean, I think we did like her too much neither, right? But we ended up amazing, very close friends and wonderful writing partners. And I was, when she died, I mean, she was younger than I was. So yeah, that was hard, That was hard.
So I like what you said about if you want to go ahead and do something, you don't want to write a particular book, collaborate with someone else and that sort of thing. Which brings me to the question that I have been wanting to ask is, as you continue through writing your novels, your poetry pieces, every piece of written work you've done, you've also written plays, children's plays, and apparently too in another language. Who critiques your work? How do you manage criticism? Tell us about that process.
Stop right there, because that is a most important, significant, critical question. I say all the time, a village writes my books, right? I learned a term quite recently. It is called beta reader, B-E-T-A. So you have alpha readers and beta readers. I mean, I don't know if you have any delta readers. I mean, I don't know about them, but we know about alpha and beta. Alpha reader is apparently somebody who, I guess if you're a terribly important writer, you would send your foul papers, any old thing that you write down, you send to your alpha reader. I would never insult anybody. I'm not important enough to send anybody my foul papers. But your beta reader is somebody to whom you send your work when it's, when you could do with feedback on it. And many people are really generous to me, and they read my work for me, and they save me from myself so many times. I can give you some examples if you want. When I was writing the book of Joseph, the book of Mary, and the man are a trilogy, right? And they are about the life of Jesus. Now, if you go to research, there's not a lot written about the circumstances in Palestine, really, in Judea and Samaria and Galilee. There's not a lot written, but there are some things. And I did a lot of research to write those books. But when I sent around, like to my beta readers, there's a wonderful poem, I like to think it's wonderful, in the book of Joseph, about how Joseph's uncle make a rocking chair, right? They make a rocking chair, how him playing it, hunting, and finally make this rocking chair. Well, one of my beta readers said, you understand, of course, that these people did most of the time sit on the ground and have no, there is not a lot of wood, as in, actual lumber, trees, big trees in that part of the world. And therefore, if you don't have lumber, you can't be a carpenter. In fact, the word used for Joseph in the Bible, in the Greek translation, is tekton, and it does not mean a carpenter, it means a worker in wood and stone. I don't think a lot of people know that. Tekton, so Joseph and Jesus would have been workers in wood and stone, right? But the lady said to me, hello, the people that sit on the ground. Nobody was sitting in no chair. They never have, you know, the habit of the day was most of the time to sit on the ground. And if them sit on anything, it was likely say to be a bench carved out of stone, right? Mm-hmm. She saved me from myself, so that I included the poem because it was very funny for me. It is a very funny poem because I'm sitting in a rocking chair on Papa Lick, right? Because he was the first man to make a rocking chair, right? So I never know if him swing too hard, but was going to go over the back of the chair. But she saved me from myself because I put a little note in the back that said, I am aware that most people at this time sat on the ground, but I wanted to have, you know, this little joke. So I put it there. And there were other people who caught different things. And not only for, as far as mistakes go, that's not what I'm saying, but somebody who read it for me said, you introduced this really interesting woman. Now, these are all people with makeup, right? Because they didn't exist. There's not a lot about Joseph in the Bible, apart from his marriage to Mary and whatever else follows. We don't even know when he died, right? Right. But she what was I gonna say? The account of Deborah, for instance. I give Joseph a first wife, and his first wife's name is Deborah, and she's a very spunky chick, right? And they're unlucky. They have a baby, lose a baby, have a baby, lose a baby. So when Deborah dies, she leaves Joseph with two little girls. They've had two boys, and the boys have grown up, but he has two little girls, and this is why he decides he can't bring up, him is a man, he don't know nothing about raising girl, pick me. So it comes to him that he really does need, he needs to marry again. And so I invent this lady named Rivka, and Rivka is very funny. But I just sort of invent her, put her there. She serves her purpose. Somebody who read it said to me, but Rivka is very interesting. You need to tell us what happened with Rivka. So I wrote another poem that said this and this and this and this. And this is what happened to Rivka. So right. I am absolutely grateful to people like Mervyn and Eddie Baugh, and people who have read my work. Olive Senior is a host of people who read for me and who give me comments, and they are my villagers, the right. villagers who make the books.
It's very curious to hear you share about writing the story of Joseph and Jesus and the man, that trilogy that you've done. Because I remember one Easter, I did a series of radio dramas that I produced. Even Alan Scott, I remember, was played one of my characters. And it was bringing the Bible stories into, brought the Bible stories to real life so that we could assimilate them and not in the old English King James fashion. What inspired you to do these pieces and do this trilogy? Why treat with the popularly known Christian stories or Judeo-Christian stories that we have come to learn over the years?
Well, the answer really is simple. We used to go to St. Thomas Aquinas, which is the university church. So many churches that are attached to universities are called St. Thomas Aquinas. Right. And I won't go into the long story. Long story short, there was a new priest there, and he came very stiff. But after about 6 months, he was jumping on the altar to the music, right? Because people like Barry Chavans were composing Black Up, Sunrise, and people say, well, Black Up, that is one of the hymns, one of Barry's hymns. So he was jumping on the altar, and he invited a Rasta sculptor to produce some, like statues of the Jesus, Mary, and so on, and he put them into the churchyard. And he said to me, after the Good Friday service one Friday, he said, Pam, why don't write something for Good Friday? Well, the year passed, and the next year Lent started, and I never write nothing. But when I like make promise when I don't keep. So I thought, well, I promised I need to produce something. Totlin, I have to say, Holy Spirit. One line dropped into my head. The line was, "Uno see me dying trial." I knew it was a woman's voice. I knew the person came. After the line came, the person came. I named her Naomi. I decided she was, the story, it was like it came to me. She was a maid in the court of Pilate's wife. I remember Pilate's wife sent a message to him, say, have nothing to do with that good man. Yes. Well, our mistress sent her. So go look and tell me what they're doing with the man, which is why the book is called The Man, a performance poem. And so that book was not really written as a book. It was, in fact, performed at St. Thomas Aquinas Church on Good Friday. It was the Good Friday service, right? That is how that book happened, right? And it's as though immediately after I wrote that book and it was published, I started to think about a book from Mary's point of view, her story, right? But it is interesting, Totlin, because that first book was published in 1995. And the Book of Mary is not published until 2015, right? So which was a long time afterwards. And people say, well, how come it takes so long? I don't know, because I was thinking about it right after I finished The Man. But maybe I needed the skills that I acquired in that period of time. I don't know, right? But The Man came, the Book of Mary came, I wrote it backwards, right? Because I wrote The Man first, which is the crucifixion story, which in a way is the end of the story. And then I wrote the Book of Mary, and then I wrote the Book of Joseph. And Joseph really comes first, Joseph and his story. And he marries, and his wife dies, and he goes and he marries Mary. And then Mary's story comes out of that because she has this baby, and it's a big scandal. And I explore the scandal. Totlin, people don't know. I don't think a lot of people know that that young woman with that belly, the whole of Nazareth chatter. What a nasty little gal. Okay, that is not Joseph Pinckney, is not Joseph Pinckney. And I explore that in both of the books, right? In the Book of Mary in particular. But what I started to say was that the punishment for being pregnant was to stand in the door with somebody that was not your spouse or your betrothed child. You stand in the door of your father's house, Deuteronomy, and I think also Leviticus. And the men in the village stone you to death. As you stand there, they stone you to death, right? Yes. The whole business of one, the fact that Mary was pregnant and people chatter, basically, she was an unwed mother, so to speak. She was betrothed to Joseph, but she was married to him, and she had a belly. And it's not Joseph the belly, right? So there was the whole business of the scandal of that and what she must have endured as a young woman, because she was quite young. She was not 20, she was not 25. The tradition at the time was that women married young. And so she was really a very courageous person. You can imagine sitting down one day and you see one big bright angel appear, and the angel come and say, listen, Jah wants you to be his baby mother, right? Which is basically what the angel said to her. That's basically what happened, yes. Yeah, what would you, I bring a question, bring question for you, right? Yahweh said he wanted to be a baby mother, right? And she actually, in the Book of Mary, once or twice, when she talks to God, she calls him my baby father, right? Which is what? Yes. That's how it went. Yes. Whose baby? God baby. So God is the baby father. Jesus' baby father is Jah. I love the use of the Jamaican language in the story as you're explaining. I love the use as a linguist, as a language specialist, as a teacher of that language that we use to communicate. What are further your thoughts on the business of using even more and more of our own vernacular in our writings,
in our performance. Well, we were already doing it in performance long time.
Amen. That's an important point, you know, something we don't realize, I think, maybe, Totlin, because the songs, Mento, right? Rocksteady, reggae, and the performances, pantomime, right? Which you would know all about.
Right.
The vernacular was being used, right? And we became slowly accustomed to the fact that Jamaican language was something that we could express ourselves in this kind of way. And then, in a way, the writing followed that, right? Yes. But first of all, I write a lot. In fact, I think I had a book, the Pink Icing, the short story collection, was rejected by somebody who eventually published one of the two last books, a very important American publisher. But I think that I guess their market, right? They figured Jamaican language, no, right? After that, I haven't had a problem because a lot of what I write, I mean, this book, which is the novel, Red Jacket, was praised by the jury that shortlisted it for its use of many Englishes, right? Well, they think of Creole as a English, right?
But it's kind of sort of, yes.
Yes, it is. It has a lexicon, its vocabulary is English, right? And a lot of linguists now say that Jamaican, or some linguists now say that Jamaican patois is in fact an English. It's a version of English. But I make no apology. Increasingly, I have written more and more in Jamaican language, right? And we have, again, the singers going ahead. Bob Marley. So Eminem, I understand, is very versed in Jamaican Creole. And maybe Sinead O'Connor is not so bad about the Creole. Them learn it while I'm singing Bob Marley, right? So we have colonization in reverse, Miss Lou would call it, people learning our language, our Jamaican patois, because it's an extraordinary literary medium. I couldn't write without it, you know, I really couldn't.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Do your characters come knocking at your door in the middle of the night?
Not really.
How are you so inspired? Because you just confessed to us that you write a lot. How do you manage your writing time and your acumen? How do you apply yourself? Tell us a little bit about what goes on in that dark room of literature that pours forth from your pen or your computer.
I am a very, very disorganized. So bigging up all the people who are not, you know, turning up in front of the computer every day because they tell me this is what great writers do. Derek Walcott was supposed to have sat before his typewriter and he would sit there for 6 hours, and even if not even one word came to him, every day him turn up and him sit down for 6 hours. That is not how I work. And I suspect that it might discourage many people because they figure they don't have the discipline to turn up every day. I don't turn up every day. That having been said, a lot of writing goes on in my brain. There was a famous discussion, I think of it as famous. Me and the famous Dennis Scott did come to sort of blows because me tell him, say, you know, I can write a whole poem in my head, Dennis. He said, what? I said, yes, I can write a whole poem in my head, right? And then after I write it down on the paper. Well, there is this whole business of lineation and where you break the line. And Dennis was a serious poetic person. Well, I was not it's not that I wasn't a serious poetic person, but I was a person who was making babies and running a house, and you women, yourself included, would understand. I mean, people like us write our poems on the back of an envelope or on the back of a bill that comes from a supermarket because something comes to you and you put it down, right?
Yes.
And the fact is that a lot of writing is taking place, a lot of thinking about characters and so on is taking place in your head. The story is building inside of you before you sit down in front of the computer, before you take up the pen and put it to the page, right? So I'm encouraging people who are there saying, well, I mean, I have the discipline to become a writer. don't take it on too serious. If you really want to do it, just begin and do it when you are able to do it. And if you are really meant to be a writer, Martin used to say, if you are meant to be a writer, I'm not the only person, it will not let you go until you answer it. It will not let you go until you, well, you've written 2 books, so I know, you know, when you nod and say yes, it won't let you go. And I mean, Neville, for instance, is somebody who I think begins his storytelling writing, because as he explained to you when you spoke, he had written many books before that, and he had written articles, you know, academic articles and so on. But the books that he was talking to you about are, as he said, stories. He makes his point by telling stories. And so clearly the stories were pulling him. At a certain point in time, he just felt he needed to tell his stories. He needed to put them down, right? So, but I don't turn up every day, but I crash. When it gets hold of me, I will keep going for hours, right? Through the night, if you want. Not so much anymore, because I'm an old lady, I need sleep, right? But there were times when, for instance, you're working on the textbooks, you're working with an editor in the UK, or 2 editors, and the person, this happened with the last textbook I revised, post Grace Walker Gordon's death. That was my writing partner's name. And the editor in the UK was waiting for stuff to come from me for her to work on, to go to the other editor, to go back to me. And so, you know, in that circumstance, the time lapse, all of that you have to manage, but you keep your nose to the grindstone, because it's not just a question of, do I feel like writing this morning? It is somebody over there waiting for what you're going to do. And when they send stuff back to you for correction, it's the same thing. So I will go and keep going once I get started, right? But I'm encouraging people who feel that they can't write because they don't have the necessary discipline, that if you need to do it, it will take hold of you, and you will find that it doesn't let you go until you.
As a creative, I can definitely attest to that. Many nights you're sleeping in your bed and you're turning, mid-turn, mid-sleep. You want to go back to sleep. And there is the book talking to you. There are the words writing through your mind. And sometimes you have to just make sure you have a pen and you scribble something in the dark. Hopefully in the morning when you wake up, you can. You know, but I want to point out something to you. You said earlier about the trilogy, the trilogy of the man and Mary and those 3 pieces, right. The man Joseph and so on. You said that you think you did them in the wrong order, but I put it to you, Pam, that nowadays Marvel and DC and all of that, that's exactly what they're doing. They're going back pre the original whatnot, giving you backstories. So you're right in step. You're right. There's nothing old fogey about you at all, especially when I see that you completed your PhD program in just the other day. You just completed your PhD program in 1998. I still consider that as the other day, you know. You did the aspects of imagery, language, and structure. Now, you mentioned earlier that maybe it was that you didn't develop the skills and the aptitudes to produce those later books that came out in that trilogy because you didn't have certain, you know, whatevers. How did studying for your writing for your PhD assist you as a writer? How did you find that you approached items, topics, ideas differently, if at all?
That's a good question, Totlin. And so I'm not going to leap to give you an answer. I can say that the PhD is about the poetry of Derek Walcott and Kamal Brathwaite. Brathwaite, people ask me, you know, who are the poets that inspired you? And I have to say, first, paramount, Louise Bennett Coverley, right? But also very much Kamal Brathwaite. And I tell people, Louise gave me permission in a way. She didn't give me permission. I grew up. I can recite Louise to you now. You know, go on, girl, your favorite teggy reg. Is where you're going to go to. You and your bugu, you have a friend and think me afraid for you. Go away. You favor hang pan nail. Is me you want to trace? Me is just the one to take my hand and lay upon your face. I grew up with Louise in my mouth, right? So, and Louise in my head and Louise in my heart. But Louise was a lady. Now, Camo was a very misbehaving man, right? So Camo gave me permission. Camo gave me permission to go on bad, right? To use bad word and cuss and carry on, right? Because, I mean, I remember a line from Rites of Passage, which is Camo's, the first book in his first trilogy. Archie Hudson Phillips, you probably know Archie. I am a fucking Negro man, hole in my head, brains in my belly. That's a straight quote, right? So I got permission from Camo. So those two influences, Camo Brathwaite, and I was spending many, many years reading Camo's poetry. So in that respect, certainly. And to give Derek Walcott his ups, one of my books is a collection called Subversive Sonnets, and the subversion in part is Subversive Sonnets. I guess I could say that from Derek Walcott, I learned the more traditional, if you want, the skills to use more traditional forms. I'm not sure, right? Because, you know, you go into high school and you're learning what? Shakespeare, and Shakespeare writes sonnets, and, you know, who else? That lady, sonnets from the Portuguese, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, who has a very interesting Jamaican connection, Tatlin. People should look it up. Because she's a Jamaican, her family connections are in Jamaica. I mean, there is so much of this history. Did you know, this is entirely off the topic, but one of Canada's early prime ministers has a Jamaican wife, right? Most people did not know that or do not know that, but it is so, it's true. Anyway, that's off topic. That's just a little sideways thing.
No, but you see, these make for great stories. These make for absolutely beautiful stories. Just pretty much like there's the hottest thing now on Netflix, the story of Queen Charlotte, who she's supposed to have been of African descent and all of that wonderful thing. And when I did the backstory research, I said, wow, King George was really a crazy dude, but you know, she stuck it out, had 13, 15 children with him. Wonderful story that we get to watch and enjoy.
I just finished, I shouldn't confess this, a lady of my sobriety, but you were talking about prequels, about writing things back with, and the most recent, the episodes of the most recent part of the series, however you call it appropriately, is in fact Queen Charlotte and King George's backstory, right? Yes. So, and I found it interesting. In fact, I was thinking, I was very lucky at Alpha. Nobody dragged me through European history. So all the people who complain about their colonial education, I never get no education like that. I don't know when King George and King which and King what and Queen whoever. I do not know. Do not ask me. I do not know, right? But I'm sitting down, I'm thinking, I'm looking at Bridgerton, I say so without apology. And I'm thinking, I wonder how much of this story is actually true. I should go and look up the history, right? I mean, I know that Josephine, Napoleon's wife, was a woman of color. She came from, I think, one of the French islands, right? Or, well, anyway, one of the small islands in the Caribbean. So I knew about Josephine, but I didn't know about Charlotte, right? And I think that's such a good way to get people, I'm not going to say young people, even old people like me, interested in history, because yes. Now I think I want to go find out about, I mean, I knew George was crazy, and you know, I know a little bit, but as I say, I was very fortunate. I was not dragged through European history in high school, praise God, right? So I don't have any of that kind of brainwash. I don't have any of those kinds of hang-ups. I was spared that. But I mean, we learned about Bartholomew de las Casas, which is much closer to home. Yeah, I think it's a great way to get people interested in history, and history is storytelling too.
Oh, right? Big time. It's absolutely phenomenal. The other day, for instance, you talk about looking up things. I went to this Derby themed event recently, and just on the weekend they had the running of the Kentucky Derby, as I mentioned earlier. And I said, you know what? Here we are in 2023, people are getting excited about these events, but I like to find out about the origin of these events. Why do we do the things the way we do? Who is involved? And of course, you know, there is a lot of blackout in modern history about the various races. I mean, every race. I'm not just talking about races of African descent, but from the Asian. Yesterday, I was watching something on PBS where they were talking about the hassle that Chinese immigrants went through in the United States.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
At one point, the Asian immigrants could not apply and receive US citizenship, even though they were the backbone of the labor force during a particular time in history. Only Black people and white people could get this. And I mean, it's fascinating the more I live that when we look over our history, as Marcus Garvey said, if you don't know who you are, where you're coming from, if you don't know your past, you know, you're not going to know who you are and how to move forward. I'm paraphrasing here.
Yes. Yes.
So, you know.
Sorry, Marcus makes an appearance in this. He does.
Which is, I'm glad you have that book up, because that's the next question I'm going to ask you. It's so intriguing speaking to you. I think we may end up having to have a part 2. Marilyn Ballantyne says to say hello, Pam, and great to see you. And she was speaking fondly of your husband earlier on to off air. Red jackets. When I see red jackets, I immediately think about Paul Revere in the United States, and I think about the English fighting with, you know, with the U.S. colonials at the in Boston. I don't know if red jackets has anything to do with that. You tell us about red jackets and tell us why the name of the book in that way.
Again, Totlin, you ask these discerning questions. Not to flatter you, but absolutely, you're spot on. First of all, there's a whole process. I'll get through this quickly. Anybody watching me now who has written a book and who is considering a title, the first thing you do is do something called a title search, because you want your book to have a unique title, a title that no other book have. Well, I have to say, Red Jacket is not such a one, right? The other problem is, of course, in this great age of the Google search, you want, when you have your book title, you want, when you put it in, that only that will come up. The only thing that's going to come up when you enter that is your book. Okay, that is, again, not the case with Red Jacket. When you type in Red Jacket, guess what you see?
Shopping stuff.
Clothes. That is not my name for the book. That wasn't, right? But I think that the heroine, the protagonist, the female protagonist, is a jacket. In Jamaican talk, she's a jacket, right? And so they were, I guess, fascinated with the notion that we would have a name for such a person. And she is, oh, I want to talk about this. She is a red jacket. Now, there is a very small group of Black people in the world who have red skins, red hair, light eyes, right? It's a small group of Black persons who are in fact red, often freckles as well. So freckles, red hair, reddish skin, and light eyes. And this is also what this child or this woman, because it begins with her as a little girl and she's adopted. And the problem is her family are, as she considers them, good Black people, as in people who present as phenotypically Black. And here she is, this adopted child, and she's red, which is why people say she's a jacket, because her brothers and sisters are all very Black people, right? So I guess they thought it was a grand thing to put the red and the jacket together. But that would not have been, it wasn't my first choice for a title, right? It was, and when you put things in the hands of a publisher, you rapidly come to discover that your choices are, in many respects, limited. They will make decisions over and above your head. And unless you want to get into a brawl which you don't want to do, right? You know, kind of go along with the program.
Acquiesce. Yeah, acquiesce. And yeah,
no, don't say acquiesce. Acquiesce me sound like a, you know, like me no have no backbone and thing. But you know, I think
your battles. You pick your battles.
That's it.
You pick your battles well.
Your battles.
Because that leads me to the next question. How difficult or easy has it been to find the publishers to put your work to the press?
Not difficult. And the answer to that is, or the reason for that is, Canada is an amazing country in that respect, right? The government supports publishing. No matter how big the publishing company, right? You can get money from the government. And therefore, Canada has many small presses. And one of the reasons why more people perhaps don't know me as a writer is because I publish with primarily small presses. The first big press that has published my creative work is this one, right? It's a press, it's a press in New York called New Directions, and it is it's not perhaps a very large press, it's not Penguin Random House, blah, 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 but it is a very important, you can look it up on, you know, do the usual Google search, New Directions. It's a very special press, and the name tells you something about what its interest is in. Its interest is in writers who are going in new directions, right? But because I publish with small presses, and because publishing has become increasingly diversified, like this press, which has published my last 3 collections of poetry, is run by 2 immigrants, because they are, from, I think, through West Africa, can't remember which country, but they are both Asians. I mean, Canadians say Asian. We would say Indian. There are people who come whose family heritage is Indian, right? And so they are not the only people. We have presses now that are, well, not now, because again, interesting history. There are 2 presses in Canada. One is called, or was called, because it doesn't exist anymore, Sister Vision Black Women and Women of Color Press. That was the title of the press, right? So publishing here is not in the hands of a bunch of white men, right? And therefore, a writer like myself with a manuscript has a good chance of having a small press, perhaps run by people who look like me, people who come from somewhere else like me, accepted and published, right? And this is high quality publishing. This is not, you know, any little brebre business. Right. Do you know the word brebre?
Oh, of course, quite so. Listen to me, man. What do you? Look here, as you talk about, you know, finding the right publisher to handle your work, and it's not been an issue. I am happy that you are where Miss Lou was too before she passed away. I'm happy that you are where supports the literary arts and arts in general, because I think, you know, the more I realize that we have open source information, the more we have everybody having this media platform because of social media, I think it is important for us to stand our ground, who have work that is worthy of praise. You recently, for instance, got a celebration award that happened just a few weeks ago, that you were awarded. I want to ask you about that in a minute, but I'm happy that you are still producing the work that you're producing, and you are providing us with these items that we can go to. I mean, Red Jacket sound like a book that I would just love to just spend. I'm taking a month off and reading all these books, I swear. And just sing literature I love so much. And I remember the excitement, the within me, because I studied literature at university. What I remember when I started to read all these West Indian stories, how warm they felt within me, because I know what I'm talking about. You know, I see it, and to read it in print. I remember, you know, my grandmother used to be so upset with me. She ran a grocery business back in the day in St. Thomas, Dalvey, and I would love reading. Boy, every day you get up, you take out the book, everything you read. I should have listened to her a little bit more. Maybe I'd have been a multi-millionaire by this with her serious business acumen. But I'm happy that you are aware your work is supported. And writing is something, when I look at your resume, it says writer from XYZ date to present. This is something that is always with you, the ability to write and produce work of the literary nature that you do. As I speak of literary nature, what is your favorite writing of your own?
That is a very hard question. You know, I'm gonna, if I can find it, I will show it to you, because it's a very slim book. Oh Lord, Tatlin, now I'm gonna be able to find it. Yes, I find it. This is called The True Blue of Islands. And somebody who has written critically on my work, and in fact is one of the two editors that produced this book, said to me recently, that is your best work. This is a book that is kind of like a wake, if you want, you know, a whole wake. This is a book about my murdered brother. I have a brother who was murdered in Jamaica in 2004. No, he didn't launder money. No, he wasn't into dope. Just a man with a plan and a fervent hope. That is a quote from a dub poem in here for him. I wrote it because, again, you know, the hurricane upset a little 9-year-old girl. She wrote a poem. The murder upset a big woman, because 2004, I'm a big woman, right? And so I wrote this book. So in a way, this is a book that is close to my heart. I don't know if I would say it's necessarily my favorite, but a book close to my heart, because it is my mourning, it is my grieving for my brother.
Condolences still to you and your family.
Thank you, my love.
That's never a good story to have to experience. But thankfully you had the way to use writing as a catharsis to deal with it.
Absolutely.
And that's the beauty of you know, developing your craft of writing. No matter what language you write it in, no matter how much expletive you want to use, you know, you have to put on the feelings on the paper. It makes a difference. I believe it truly makes a difference. Yeah. There's one other very important thing I was going to ask you before I let you go tonight, because this has been so intriguing.
Wonderful conversation. Thank you very much, Totlin. I really enjoyed talking to you. Absolutely.
Listen, this is like, I'm coming to see you in Toronto. Come on. This conversation has to continue.
When you're ready.
You know? One of the things that I wondered about when it comes on to you and your writing, do you perform your work outside of that audiobook that you did recently? Do you perform your work more often than not?
You mean, do I perform it? Yes. Yes.
You mentioned about your dub poetry. So when I hear the dub poetry, all of a sudden now I hear everybody, I hear all the drummers in my head.
Yeah, no. For me, I hear everything I read, I hear everything I write, and I perform. In fact, I think it's still online. There is a review, a really splashy review of this book by a critic, Donna Bailey Nurse, and she's a Jamaican heritage woman. And she said, you know, this person is, she is a direct descendant of Louise Bennett Coverley. If you have a chance, just go to hear her perform her work. I perform my work, I do, and without apology. I mean, many people feel that poetry should be respectably read like, how could we know they flayed your body?
No, I don't believe that. It has to have
fire. That's not me. You know,
it has to have fire. It has to have energy. It has to have gumption. In fact, let me take this opportunity to inform you, if you're watching, that there is a video collection of Pam Mordecai's poetry. And it includes her 5th collection, Subversive Sonnets, that she just shared. And you can actually see Pam, perform? Usually, I ask our authors to read some a little bit, but if she reads just a little bit, it's not, we're gonna want it all, and we'd be here all night. But there is a video of Pam reading her poetry, and all you need to do is to just Google it. It's available for free to the public, and it is archived at the Memorial University of Newfoundland Center for Innovation in Teaching and Learning, and is also at the Digital Library of the Caribbean. Yes, indeed. Now, you have 3 children and a granddaughter. You're passing on any of this writing aptitude to them?
My daughter is an academic, and so she has to write. But my daughter is also, an impossible girl. She wrote, I think quite long ago, a Mills and Boon kind of novel. Me say, Rachel, you can show me? Mommy, I don't know where to find it. So yes, she writes. And my older son at present is trying, you ready for this, Tatlin? He is writing a novel on Twitter. He is writing a novel on Twitter. Now, I don't know how this novel is being written on Twitter. I see characters in it come up every now and then, but he is writing a novel on Twitter. And my younger son is also, he is multi-talented in that he likes writing songs, something that I think that maybe we don't talk about enough in when the kids at school. You can be a billionaire from writing songs. You don't have to sing them, you can just write them, right? But he also writes short stories. So yes, I mean, their father was a brilliant writer, I tell you, much better than me. So I guess you could say it is in the genes, them get it from both sides. So yes.
I love it. As you were talking about red jackets, and I look forward to reading that novel. It comes to me when you describe the type of Black person that has that red coloring. We also have Black people who have blue colorings, and that's the blue men of Morocco. Mm-hmm. I know that there's a term we use in Jamaica, and we refer to them as redibo.
Yes.
I believe that redibo, as I'm, thinking about it, they probably meant that they are from the Igbo tribe. Mm-hmm. And they have this red coloring, this Igbo tribe of red colored people. So it's all very interesting. And I believe that writers like yourself bring us even more in touch with the diversity that we live amongst. And I think we're also living in one of the best times of the world's history, because it's like all the worlds literally collide. They interlope, they're intersecting. We're able to see so many different things take place. In our lifetime, we have seen an African-American US president. We have seen the crowning of a new king. I born, come see. I born, come see Queen Elizabeth.
I prefer not the king business, but I have to tell you, I did not think I would live to see a Black man president of the United States. I could not have imagined that the Black family in the United States was going to be unique, absolutely, without parallel, without match. All the presidents that will come afterwards cannot possibly be as talented, as classy, as versatile, all the adjectives, pull them up. The epithets are not enough, right? So, and the other thing, I think we are lucky in Tatlin, and you come north and you meet people who have, never seen a Black person, or whose lives proceed without seeing Black people here until they get to the hospital. And then the entire the medical systems in North America would collapse without the immigrants who keep them alive, right? I don't mean the people who clean the floor. I mean the thoracic surgeon, the orthopedic surgeon, the super duper nurses who can be doctors. So we in Jamaica are really, I listened to Neville Ying talk to you about his Chinese father and his Black mother, right? I mean, we are an amazing set of people, right? I know that I won't call her name, but the wife of a poet friend says, everybody have them white grandmother, right? Everybody have them white grandmother. Somewhere, maybe it's a great grandmother, and probably everybody have them Chinese grandmother too, right? I make no apology for saying Chinese. That is Jamaica. I speak Jamaican. That's how we talk, right?
That's how we talk, yes. No ill will, no bad feelings, no nothing. That's possible language.
Then we come north, and there are language censors here. You cannot say this word, you cannot say that word. But I say, it is my language. This is how we speak. I make no apology for the word coolie, for instance. People here freak out. Yes. We have coolie babbles in our family. In my family, of the 15 grandchildren, in almost every one of those 5 families, there is a child who looks very Indian, you know, the skin, the hair, everything. I mean, but I'm going to stop saying coolie because a whole set of white people consider the word a derogatory thing. I am not a white person who considers the word derogatory. So
right. It's just how we are. In wrapping up, because I need to let you go, you know, in wrapping up, where's the best place to get your books? Do we just go to Amazon or go to your website?
Go to Amazon, go to the website. Amazon, the only problem, of course, is the whole business of getting books from Amazon in Jamaica. But Jamaicans, being the versatile people that they are, have solved that problem. Absolutely. So you can go to Amazon. Yeah. And you could also go to the library and say, Pamela Mordecai has this amazing book. It is called Red Jacket. Do you have it? And if the librarian says no, you really ought to get it. It is a fantastic book. Libraries are there to serve our needs, right? And you know, you mightn't have how much, I can't remember how much, $25 to spend on the book, but the library has funding, and you go to the library and you say, I would like to have this book by 𝙁𝐼𝐷. Do you have this book? No. Well, I really think it's a very interesting book. You really should get it. Make the governments, make your taxpayers' money work for you. You are paying.
I think it's a wonderful tip for everybody. And I'm going to post it there. I'm going to post that too. Make sure you request authors' books in your local libraries so that they bring it to you. I do agree. Pam, I think you have explained to us why you write, how you write, what you navigate when you're writing, what you're thinking when you're writing, what you're not thinking, how you're organized in your own type of organization, of this organization, how you can write a complete poem in your head, much to the chagrin of my dear director, Dennis Scott. I know how he was. He was a stickler for dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Yes, he was indeed. He was indeed. 𝙁, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure and privilege to talk to you.
Same here. And we shall talk soon again. Walk good, feel good, take it easy. We're going to talk to each other soon. Thank you so much.
Good and good duppy walk with you.
Yes, man, make good duppy follow you. God bless.
God bless.
Again. I want to thank you so much, my viewers, for just sharing with us in this wonderful, wonderful conversation. If you enjoyed this conversation, do not hesitate, like and share and share. And look out again for our Why I Write YouTube coming soon. Stay tuned. Take care. This is 𝙁 𝐼𝐷 signing out of Why I Write.